The Prime Minister has apologised, admitting he caused a great deal of anxiety in Australia by taking a holiday during the bushfire crisis. Scott Morrison received a briefing at New South Wales Rural Fire Service headquarters this morning after returning home from Hawaii last night. He's also joined New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian at Picton Bowling Club, which has been housing evacuees from the Greenwattle Creek fire. In some good news, a man who went missing during the fires in Dargan has been found safe and well. But it's feared dozens of homes have been destroyed or damaged in the bushfires yesterday. One emergency warning remains in place for the Gross Valley fire near Blackheath, despite cooler conditions in the state. Let's go live now to our reporters on the ground in New South Wales. Charlotte Mortlock is in Picton. Charlotte, the Prime Minister has just visited an evacuation centre. What's he had to say?
Yeah, he has, Danica, and right now he is inside the building behind me, which is the Wallandilly Control Centre. Now, that has all sorts of personnel from New South Wales Rural Fire Service to National Parks, Fire and Rescue and Police, also local council members inside. They're getting a briefing on the strategies being used to contain the Greenwattle Creek blaze that is burning on the outskirts of southwest Sydney. But it has been a controversial week for the Prime Minister. He touched down last night from Hawaii, and at the press conference this morning at the Rural Fire Service headquarters at Sydney Olympic Park, he was asked by the media exactly where he had been. He finally admitted that he was on a family holiday after making a promise to his two daughters 7 weeks ago. Of course, this was something that was met with a lot of criticism, not only for taking the holiday, but also for not notifying anyone that there would be an acting Prime Minister in Michael McCormack. Of course, he has defended this, saying that this is what he had always done when taking private holidays.
On each time I've taken private family leave as Prime Minister, I've followed exactly the same process. There was no change. On my earlier leaves, no statement was issued. I took private family leave and no objections were raised by the press on those occasions. But it's certainly something we will rectify for next time.
The Prime Minister asked for kindness at the moment. He said it's not the time for division and it's no longer the time for discussion. Comparisons were drawn, of course. Scott Morrison was one of the most vocal attackers of Christine Nixon, who was the Victoria Chief Police Commissioner, who took time out of the Black Saturday bushfires back in 2009 to go and have dinner. He said that that was atrocious, and then comparisons were made to him going away on this family holiday during the bushfire crisis. He says the circumstances are very different.
I'm not the operational leader of an emergency service or police force. I'm the Prime Minister. And as Prime Minister, I was kept regularly and sought to be kept regularly updated on the events.
Debate has raged for months now with these bushfires over the links between climate change and the increase in fire activity that we have seen across the state. Scott Morrison saying today that he will deliver for Australians on climate change policy.
We must take action on climate change. We are taking action on climate change. At the last election, I said we would. I said we would meet and beat our Kyoto targets. I said we would meet our Paris commitments in a canter. That's what I promised Australians when we went to the last election, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
The Prime Minister cut his trip short to Hawaii by just a day after finding out the tragic news that 2 Rural Fire Service volunteers had been killed on Thursday night, and that was actually at the fire burning very close to where I am, the Greenwattle Creek blaze. They were killed after their fire truck rolled over near Buxton in the outskirts of southwest Sydney.
Charlotte Mortlock live for us. Thank you for the update. Meanwhile, in South Australia, 2 watch and act alerts are now in place as crews try to gain the upper hand on several blazes. Emily Burley joins me now live from the Adelaide Hills. Emily, what's the focus on the ground today?
Danica, today the focus is largely on assessing the damage as Adelaide Hills residents are allowed back into their homes. We know at least 15 properties have been destroyed in this area. Of course, that number could climb as assessment teams head out into the region and begin an official tally of the devastation. One man has also died. His body was recovered from this fire ground yesterday. There was another death on Friday at Lameroo. A man crashed his car into a tree and that sparked a bushfire there, but that death is not being counted against the official bushfire death toll. Now, in terms of fire activity today, as you said, 2 watch and act warnings are currently in place. One of those is for Duncan on Kangaroo Island, the other for Cuddly Creek here in the Adelaide Hills. Both those fires continuing to challenge firefighters. All of the fires across the state started on Friday in those catastrophic conditions. We saw record temperatures and very strong winds. Thankfully, conditions have eased off significantly, and it's hoped firefighters will get the upper hand today. But we did hear overnight financial assistance is now available for people affected by fires under the National Disaster Recovery Fund. That is for residents in the Adelaide Hills, the city of Playford and also the Lower Eyre Peninsula who have lost a home or their home's been severely damaged, or who have lost a loved one or a loved one has been seriously injured. That's $1,000 per adult and $400 for children. And Danica, that money will be available from tomorrow.
Emily Burley, live for us. Thank you. Meanwhile, a total fire ban is in place for large parts of Queensland as emergency crews try to gain the upper hand on blazes raging across the state. The severe fire danger rating is forecast for the northern goldfields, upper Flinders, central highlands and coalfields. Temperatures are forecast to soar in areas of inland Queensland, eventually moving across the state's east coast. Around 60 fires are currently active in Queensland, with authorities monitoring 8 that pose potential threats. We're now going to take you live to Picton, where the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is speaking, ahead of Scott Morrison also making an announcement.
And we had the privilege and the honour of meeting with families who've lost everything but not lost their lives, and they were eternally grateful. Even though they're going through a lot of shock and a lot of hardship, they couldn't speak highly enough of our amazing firefighters on the ground who tried to save their properties, but again, at least save their lives. And again, other examples of people who are so grateful to have discovered their properties are okay. And it was wonderful to see that in a very short amount of time, even though literally hundreds of people had walked through the evacuation centres at Picton and Mittagong and also Narellan, that many families have been billeted and alternative accommodation has been provided until they find out whether their properties are safe or until they get the devastating news that they've lost everything. And we're making sure that whether it's through our chaplaincy services, through family and community services, or in fact through all of our state government agencies, that everybody is supported during this very difficult time. And I in particular want to thank community members who've opened up their facilities, whether they're clubs, whether they're other facilities, to allow community members to come in and use those facilities. And the generosity of the community down here has just been outstanding, and it really exemplifies what we've seen in other parts of the state. And for some communities, experiencing this devastation since July, but now obviously this community's been hit as well. And we got the devastating news that there's not much left in the town of Balmoral. Very sad to hear that, and many residents, of course, have had that news in the last little while. And of course, communities like Buxton and others have also been very hardly hit. Now, Commissioner Fitzsimmons might want to comment about this himself, but obviously the milder conditions in the next few days will allow us to be proactive when next weekend we expect weather conditions, and Monday week in fact, for weather conditions to worsen again. I also want to say thank you to the federal government, the PM and his team, because jointly we've ensured that Wingecarribee and Wallandilly council areas will have access to that emergency funding that other council areas had received. So as you know, we announced joint funding, and now that joint funding is in excess of $63 million across the state and extends to about a dozen councils, and now Wingecarribee and Wallandilly are also part of that. So that means people can access emergency funding, but also farmers, small businesses and others can access grants of up to $15,000 just to start preparing their properties and start fixing things around their properties, like fencing that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. I also want to stress, and I've mentioned this to the Mayor who's here today, that $63 million is on top of the $25 million the New South Wales government's already set aside to get rid of hazardous materials and just to start the clean-up. So for some families will be given notification they can go back to their properties perhaps today, tomorrow. Other families have to wait, but we want to make sure, no matter what people's circumstances, just the hope of being able to move forward is so important. And so if we pick up the tab, and sometimes it costs thousands of dollars to get the hazardous materials off your property, to start the clean-up process, whether you're insured or not insured, the state government is picking up that cost to make sure you can get on with rebuilding as soon as you're ready, as soon as you're emotionally and physically ready to start that rebuilding process. And as I've said to communities all along, we're not just here today and tomorrow, but we'll be with you for the weeks and months and in some communities, years during the rebuilding process. The devastation is shocking, but I've also been just literally bowled over by the way the communities come together, the resilience and people's generosity. People with not much are giving away everything they have to support others. And it's times like these when you really appreciate what New South Wales and what Australia's about. PM?
Thank you. Thank you, Premier Gladys. It's great to be here with you today, and of course your colleagues and Angus Taylor, the local member here federally, and Commissioner Fitzsimmons. Thank you again for the tremendous job you're doing with all of your team all around New South Wales. As the Premier has just said, it's quite humbling as you come and you speak to families and you speak to individuals, you speak to the volunteers, and you see the best of Australia on every single occasion, and that's what we're seeing here again today. Friendships, neighbours, looking after each other, simple kindnesses that are being extended. I met one wonderful lady today from Malta, and she was there with another lady, a single lady, who was finding it a bit tough, and she was looking after her. She was making sure that she gets back to her property today. She's holding her hand. That's what she's doing, and this is the grace, this is the kindness that events like this need, and that's what's being displayed here on the ground. And that will continue, not just through the ordinary everyday things that are done by members of the community off their own bat, but of course also by the many volunteers, and we rightfully praise those in the RFS. But equally today we met with members of St John's Ambulance, the State Emergency Services, those who are looking after the care and welfare of animals and others. There are just so many people who stick up their hands in these times, and we thank them very, very much for everything they're doing. As the Premier has just said, the Category C assistance is being extended to the Wallandilly and the Winch-Carribbee Shires. That, as the Premier said, includes the payments for small businesses and producers of up to $15,000, but it also includes things like mental health support and small grants to communities in both shires to help them rebuild, particularly with community resilience programs and things of that nature coming out of that fund. That support is going to around 40 local government areas around New South Wales at the moment. It's the same sort of support that's being provided in many other parts, say of Queensland, where they've had the fires as well in recent times. These programs are designed to help people with their immediate needs. The Premier and I have just agreed also this morning that those $1,000 disaster assistance recovery payments that are paid for each individual, and the $400 that are paid for each child in a family, that will be extended to the Winch-Carribbee Shire as well, as it's already in place for Wallandilly, and those arrangements will be put in place today. Of course, these are the things that are done as a partnership. This is the best coordinated, the best resourced, the biggest hearted response that I think we've seen once again here from our response to these terrible disasters. It's something I think Australians, as I said earlier today, can be enormously proud of, seeing their country at their best, and that's what we have to keep focused on, allowing Australians to continue to be at their best and supporting them as they get tired, and ensure that we can continue to roll out what has been an extraordinary performance from all of those who have been involved.
Thank you. Commissioner, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm happy just to do questions.
Any questions?
Can I ask you, there's been some concern in Balmoral specifically that people will be able to get back into that village and see whether or not their home is still there.
Look, it's devastating not knowing whether your property is standing or not. Unfortunately, we have received bad news. There's not much left in Balmoral. I might ask the Commissioner to add to my comments, but I understand expert teams are going in on the ground in a lot of those communities today to make full assessments and to let people know when it's safe to go back. And even if people have lost their properties, they still want to go back to see what's left and if there is anything they can salvage. And we know that's part of the recovery. And we want people to have access to their land, to their property as soon as they can, but it has to be safe as well. And the expert teams will make sure that happens as soon as possible. Commissioner, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Prime Minister, you said that you were going to discuss the bushfire response at COAG in March. What do you say to people who might have reservations about that maybe being too long to wait to have those discussions?
Well, the immediate needs, as I said this morning, simply require the requests to come forward as they do through the regular meetings that are held of the fire chiefs and commissioners. The ministers are responsible, and David would have been there, only met a few weeks ago. And what we need to do in March is to ensure that we deal with the recommendations that come out from many of the lessons that have come through these fires, not just here in New South Wales but in other states and territories as well that have been affected. And we'll look forward to receiving those proposals then. Right now they're fighting fires, and we don't want them sitting around writing submissions. We want them obviously to be focused on the operational tasks they have in front of them. The COAG has been very busy over the back end of this year, particularly dealing with a lot of the environmental issues that we've been working on waste management, which I thank the Premier for her support on, and we'll be considering those proposals. A lot of the ministers have been meeting through their various councils in recent weeks and months, and that means there will be a really good body of work that comes forward to COAG in March, which will be in New South Wales, and it'll be in Rooty Hill, and I'm looking forward to being out there at that wonderful new facility out there in Rooty Hill.
Prime Minister, you've discussed fatigue a lot today. It's obviously something you're particularly concerned about, given we are so early still in the traditional bushfire season. Can we expect further announcements around this? How are we going to deal with that exhaustion that's clearly going to be a problem?
Well, I might defer to the Commissioner on this. He and I had a chat about this morning. It's obviously one of the many significant issues that the Commissioner manages with this incredible volunteer fighting force that is out there. But I've got to tell you, one of the things the Commissioner told me this morning, which just impressed me so much, is when a call went out, it was yesterday, wasn't it, Commissioner, for extra hands, an extra 1,000 firefighters showed up in response to that call. 1,000. That is just incredible. People know what's at stake, and they're all making their contribution, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Prime Minister. Look, fatigue management and the relentless nature of this season is certainly taking a toll, and so too is the geographic spread of the activity. You might recall for several months between July and into September, most of our effort was really concentrated in north-east New South Wales. We've now got fires spreading from north-east New South Wales, the Queensland border, down to the south coast of New South Wales. Those logistical challenges, those transport and accommodation challenges, spreading and moving people right across such a broad geographic area, all add to the challenges of fatigue and crew rotation. Underpinning all of this is a combination of members that are in a very strong position, a very ready position to sustain ongoing efforts and support for 3 days, 5 days at a time, coming back for a rest and doing another 3 to 5 days, coming back for a rest. Not everybody can do that. There are also teams that need to maintain a local presence and a local level of fire cover in case we get new fires. And then on days like yesterday, where we saw such a broad area affected by a catastrophic forecast and unfolding in the day devastating fires, we saw a whole bunch of people, in the order of 1,000 people, stand up and make themselves available to bolster that effort. We've got another 30 people that the Prime Minister met this morning in at the state headquarters that have just arrived from Canada and the United States. We've got commitments to see beyond that from our interstate colleagues and our overseas colleagues to help us with the fatigue management and the crew rotations, and where appropriate, the bolstering of numbers on those difficult days. It is a tough challenge. It is a difficult challenge, and something that we work very closely on, and we will continue to work very closely on as we see through the balance of this season. We've got to keep in mind that we're not expecting any rainfall to make any meaningful difference to these fires until January, February. That's still a way to go. We're still talking 4 to 6 weeks at best before we start to see a meaningful reprieve in the weather based on the forecasts that are available. And then, as the Prime Minister indicated, we will want to do some very critical post-incident reviews, post-season reviews, gather the information, gather the support from firefighters and communities right across New South Wales. That will take some time. The last thing we want is ad hocery or unnecessary reactiveness so close to the end of this season, and particularly when other states and territories are still going to have challenges heading well and truly into March. So there will need to be a very concerted effort to consolidate the learnings, to ensure that we're hearing far and wide and formulate that into lessons and proposals in due course. But it is certainly something we'll be very much focused on.
Commissioner, do you have any specific numbers estimating how many homes were lost in Balmoral?
Unfortunately, I don't have the specific numbers. There are teams in the field today, but as the Premier indicated, the team inside there said it was devastating. And I think they coined a phrase, there's not a lot left, or there's not much left. And that's just really confronting to contemplate. And whether it's Balmoral or Buxton are the two hardest hit areas in this locality, we are talking dozens of properties, dozens of buildings. As a matter of fact, right across all the fire grounds of the last 24 hours, we could be talking about another 100 buildings being added to the state tally so far this season. That doesn't mean there's 100 homes, and we need to make sure we differentiate between buildings, property and homes. The detailed analysis that's going on in the field now will seek to differentiate between what is a home, what is a house, what is a shed, and that takes some time. We need to be able to access these areas, but the toll is significant. And as we know earlier this morning, we are still working with police to try and locate an unaccounted for person up near Lithgow at the community for Dargan. So there's a long way to go before we really have an understanding of the magnitude and scale of the loss and damage here as a result of these fires.
So, Prime Minister, with these RFS volunteers, it's amazing what they're doing. But say if you work for yourself, you've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, with 3 days from Christmas.
Yep.
You've done yourself out of a fair bit of dough. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, it is tough, and it always has been. In the volunteer effort, it is a standing volunteer force of over 200,000 people around the country. And in fact, as I said this morning, there are more members registered here in New South Wales than we have in our ADF, both on reserve and in the standing ADF. So it is an enormous number of people who turn up, and it's not just also, as we know, when they're fighting fires, but the training that goes in, the work that is done out of season. Let's not forget that as well. This is a year-round job for anyone who's involved and turns up and over here on any other given day, and the support that goes in behind it. And so, look, we're certainly open to talking about those issues, about how we can best sustain that volunteer effort. But I think we always must be mindful that at its heart it always has been, and for it to exist on that scale, it will always exist as a volunteer effort. But as I said this morning, they're all professionals. Some are paid, some are unpaid, but they're very professional about how they do their job and how they apply themselves to that task.
Do you mind if I add something?
Sure, please, Commissioner.
Just picking up on that point, and I've spent quite a bit of time with volunteers at various different locations over the last few weeks and months, and there's a whole range of different statuses of volunteers, whether they're self-employed, employees of somebody else, retired uni students. There's a whole bunch of different categories, and particularly with the self-employed, the amount of people that I speak to, they are running a real challenge juggling what they're doing, what their priorities are. There is no doubt their absolute priority is to secure income, pay the bills and look after their family. And talking to them, they always say to me, we're up here, we're doing our bit, but every now and then I've got to get home and earn a dollar because I want to be out there with my mates, I want to be out there with my colleagues trying to make a difference. We're very conscious of that. We're really conscious of how difficult that is when you're trying to run a business. And in some of these drought-stricken areas of New South Wales, even small business owners, where the business revenue has slowed down so much because of the drought, they might be the only person running that business now, so they can't even duck away for a few days because they've had to lay off employees or something. So we know acutely very much how tough our people are doing it. But the overriding message that they've got, when these things are happening, when their colleagues are out there and they're trying to defend their communities, they want to be there with them. They want to be there partnering to try and make that difference. But it's a real challenge to juggle that up all the time. And so too for the employers. The generosity of employers, small, medium, large-scale business, private, public sector. There's a lot of people that have been away from work for a long time, and we've got arrangements in New South Wales where there's subsidies for payroll tax and all those sorts of things, and we'll continue to work with the government out what other things can be done to support and incentivise employers and small business and volunteers. And let's not forget the generosity and support of the employing community. But without the love and support at home, the partners, the families, the kids, the wives, the husbands, the mums and dads, without that love and support at home, an extraordinary sacrifice, particularly over recent months, and most notably as we head into what is regarded as some of our most precious family time of the year as we head into the Christmas and New Year break. There are going to be thousands of people not home for Christmas this year because they're going to be out there either concerned because they're directly impacted by these fires as community members, or they're going to be leaving a Christmas lunch or a Christmas dinner or a Christmas function because they want to do their part, they want to join with their colleagues and try and make a difference in that local community and continue to save and protect as much as they can. We're very mindful of all of that, and it's tough.
Given all that, Commissioner, just from what everything you've seen, how proud are you of your people?
I couldn't be any more proud.
Yeah.
And we've seen only tragically this week, the risk is real, and the consequences can be fatal. And as a result of the events only this week, there are families, there are loved ones, there are wives, and there are children, and there are mates who will never be the same again because of the horrendous events that unfolded this week. I could not be any more proud, not just of the extraordinary volunteers that I have the privilege of being the Commissioner for, but the entire coordinated fire response effort here in New South Wales, partnering with the Commonwealth. We've got men and women from firefighting agencies, forestry, national parks, fire and rescue, RFS, all the emergency services support agencies, the police, and so many functional areas of government, right through to community volunteers. It's a massive, huge logistical operation, maintaining and sustaining more than 2,000 people per shift, day and night. The people behind the scenes, the people on the front line, I could not be any more proud of the extraordinary efforts and commitment and dedication that we see rolling out day in, day out. And we know that they're going to be doing it as long as their community and their people of New South Wales are going to be threatened. And all we pray for is rain. And unfortunately, we need a lot of rain to start giving us some reprieve.
I think all Australians, are very proud. I know the Commissioner is very proud and the Premier is very proud of the services that they lead. I think all Australians are extremely proud of what's being done here and in so many other parts around the country, whether it's down on Kangaroo Island in South Australia today or other parts of Victoria or terribly right across New South Wales and up in Queensland. All Australians are proud, and they have a great reason to be proud. This is Australia at its best. Australia at its best, and we thank them for it. Thanks for everyone.
Thanks everybody.